Next, we dive into the battles of the mind, cognitive warfare in a multi-vector environment. In today's world, battles are no longer fought only on land, sea, or air. They are waged in the cognitive space. Moderating is Biljana Jovićević, journalist at Antena M. Biljana, it is a pleasure to hand you the stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Sofia. And from my side as well, I want to wish you all warm welcome to the panel. To all of you here in the conference, I hope everyone will sit it for a minute or two when we present our guest, panelist. And I will start actually with the presentation of our panelists. First one is Mrs. Kyrylo Viktorov, Head of Department of Countering Information Threats to the National Security Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation. Welcome. Second one is one state official as well, Yasmine Hafiz. She's a Chief Communication Officer for North America and Security at the United Kingdom's Foreign Commonwealth Development Office in London, with over 10 years of experience. Third one is Mr. Alen Musaefendić, Senior Analyst from Swedish Psychological Defense Agency. And the fourth one is the Milan Jovanović, Senior Analyst and Professional Research from Debunk.org. So, we in the journalistic profession usually don't like complicating and confusing headlines. And regarding our issue with a little bit complicating and confusing headlines, for the start of this panel, I would like to mention one recent successful case that encouraging all of us. Moldova, a small country in the direct proximity of Russia, and I think that we can safely say that in the eve of general elections, they were faced a week ago, and they were faced during that period with all kind of combined threats that we are talking about on this panel, but as well as all these 2 days here. That is considered multi-vector environment. And despite all odds, they succeed. And last week, Sunday evening, I think that I can safely say that all of us have a breath of relief after the results were announced. I choose to mention Moldova not just as a successful example, but because I had opportunities to spend the second week of September there and witness firsthand what a cognitive battle space look like. And I believe that for the future it will be very, very important case study for all of us. And as I mentioned, of all odds, to start with Mr. Viktorov, head, as I said, of Department of Countering Information Threat for National Security of Ukraine. By logic, most experienced address with the panel, although youngest, but having in mind all the tools, I think properly. I think that we can safely also say that despite all odds, Ukraine was very successful in countering all the threats that you are facing, military, all different kind of sorts of hybrid threats. So for the beginning, my question would be regarding your experience from the first Russian invasion in March 2014 to the full-scale invasion in February 2022. What was the most important lesson that you had to learn and implement in your multi-vector battlefield countering all of this?
Yeah, thank you so much. Good day, distinguished colleagues. Good day, dear participants. Before I start, I want to express my gratitude to colleagues from Atlantic Council, NATO, and Ukraine's mission to NATO for invitation and support during my long trip to Montenegro, to Budva. And I also want to say that it's a great honor for me and my organization to be here today to speak with you, and I really hope that it will be interesting and useful for you. So, back to your question, I want to admit that it truly touches on the very essence of how Ukraine has transformed its approach to defense from the moment of Russia invasion in 2014 to the present day. When Russia occupied Crimea and started the war in Donbass, Ukraine found itself in an entirely new reality. It was not only a military aggression, it was a war for people's minds. Russia attacked not just our borders, but also the trust of citizens in their own state, the unity of society, and Ukraine's relationships with international partners. At that time, the response was often spontaneous. Civic initiatives, journalists, and volunteers carried out tremendous work, but mostly acted in an uncoordinated way. The full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022 became a turning point. It brought a realization: if we act only reactively, we will always be chasing the enemy. And in a war where information spreads within seconds, slowness means defeat. That is why I would like, first of all, highlight 5 key lessons that Ukraine has learned and integrated into multi-vector defense strategy. These lessons have transformed how we protect the state, not only on the battlefield, but also in the minds of people, both within Ukraine and beyond its borders. So, lesson 1, institutionalizing the response from volunteer initiatives to a state system. At the beginning of Russian aggression in 2014, Ukraine's information defense was mostly horizontal and informal. Volunteers, journalists, and civil society organizations did an extraordinary amount of work, but lacked a state mandate and resources. It was heroic, yet insufficient, against the state-run machinery of Russian propaganda, which operates systematically, around the clock, and with unlimited budgets. Later came the realization that Ukrainians need a centralized, permanent structure capable of coordinating efforts and acting swiftly. In 2021, by the decision of President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky and the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, the Center for Countering Disinformation was established. During the same year, Ukraine also undertook a comprehensive update of its security architecture by adopting several key documents. In particular, the Information Security Strategy and Cybersecurity Strategy of Ukraine were enacted. This marked the official recognition that information security is a matter of national survival, not merely a component of media culture. Since then, Ukraine has moved from chaotic responses to a coordinated state policy. For example, the Center for Countering Disinformation analyzes the information environment, develops recommendations for state authorities, proposes legislative changes, and coordinates cooperation with international partners and the private sector. And lesson 2, speed and proactivity, sizing the information initiative. Another major shift has been the understanding that a slow response is doomed to fail. The years from 2014 to 2021 demonstrated that if you wait until a fake spreads, even the best debunking no longer works. The enemy always exploits an information vacuum to fill it with its own narratives. After 2022, Ukraine shifted to a different model, from mere debunking to shaping the information agenda. A crisis communication system was built, and civil servants began to be trained for a rapid response in line with international standards. Lesson 3, societal resilience, media literacy as an element of national security. After the start of Russian aggression, it became clear that disinformation can be not defeated by working only with its sources. The audience must be protected. If citizens do not know how to verify information and trust questionable sources, the enemy will always find a weak spot. That is why media literacy has evolved from a secondary educational tool into a strategic element of national security. Cross-sectoral programs are being developed, training programs are being designed, and international experts and technology companies are being involved. Lesson 4, One Voice Policy, synchronizing civilian and military communication. In 2014, Ukraine faced a major challenge. State institutions were speaking with different voices, and sometimes even contradicted each other. The enemy actively exploits this, creating chaos and mistrust. Today, the approach has changed. Strategic communications have become an integral part of military hierarchy and are aligned with NATO standards. For example, the Center for Countering Disinformation closely cooperates with Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, other security agencies, and state institutions to maintain a one-voice policy in information space. This allows for rapid and coordinated communication with Ukrainian citizens and international partners. The one-voice policy reduces room for speculations and manipulations, while increasing trust in the state and our military among allies. Lesson 5, International Coordination and Global Countering of FIMI. I think it's a key lesson, and we all understand that disinformation knows no borders. The Russian propaganda machine conducts information operation worldwide. Their goal is not only to weaken support for Ukraine, but also to undermine democratic institutions around the globe. Ukraine has progressed from being a target of attacks to becoming a country that sets standards for countering foreign information manipulation and interference. Today, there is active cooperation with international organizations, media regulators, and technology platforms, through which Ukraine not only adopts best practices, standards, and innovative approaches to strengthen information resilience, but also shares its own experience. This collaboration allows Ukraine to simultaneously reinforce its own defense and help other countries better understand the mechanism of modern hybrid threats and build collective resilience. To summarize, the main lesson Ukraine has learned is that defense must be systematic, proactive, and multidimensional. Strong state institutions have now been established to replace fragmented initiatives. Rapid and anticipatory responses to enemy actions have been organized. Protecting public awareness has been defined as a strategic priority. One voice policy among state and military structures has been ensured. International partnerships have been formed, without which it is impossible to win a modern information war. This has allowed Ukraine to withstand the largest war of our time and maintain the support of the democratic world. Today, Ukraine is ready to share this experience, as the challenges we have faced are becoming global, from disinformation operations to manipulations involving artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this deep dive. I wanted to wait for the second round of questions to ask you a few things, okay. But may I use this opportunity, because I was listening what you were talking about carefully, and two things actually sounds quite familiar to most of us regarding it's a strategic communication and it's a media literacy. And I would say that your country was especially successful in strategic communication on all kind of platforms, especially the social media platforms. Even your president, Volodymyr Zelensky, I know that he probably has more than any of us can imagine every day on his plate, but he finds the time always, or his team find the time to communicate with the public, not just public in your country, but abroad as well. How do you manage that?
It's an interesting and complicated question. I think, in my personal opinion, it's because of the unity of Ukrainian society in the beginning of full-scale invasion. We all understand that we must protect our country, and we feel responsible to our armed forces, that we must help them, that we must be strong also. And I don't know how. I think it's our nature. It was something from our soul that all people was united and still united, and everyone knows what we need to do. It was a lot of calls between different agencies. We need to react on this, we need to communicate this, because we understand that if our state, if our government will be silent, Russia will talk. So, and we cannot allow Russia to do this. So.
Thank you. We will continue this later on. Mr. Musaefendić, you are currently senior analyst for Swedish Psychological Defense Agency, but I know that you were in charge for the Western Balkans at the European External Action Service, Threat 4, not just because your origin are from here, you are very aware everything what's going on here. And but I wanted to start with the Swedish application for NATO and entering in NATO immediately after what happened in Ukraine. And it was really one short and successful story for the Swedish society. And it is really interesting how the Swedish government and all part of the society that understood what is actually the goal, how they managed to mobilize public opinion to support and to successfully enter in NATO in a short period of time. And can you imagine having in mind all what's going on in the Balkan, any of the Balkans country, implementing such a successful and short campaign sometimes in the future?
Thank you. So I'm very glad that it appears that way for an outsider, but I can assure you that the campaign was not smooth sailing. And it was, I understand that your impression is that it was brief, but actually this debate has been ongoing since the 1950s. And one important thing to keep in mind here is that Sweden has a very long and proud tradition of neutrality. The last war Sweden has fought was in 1814 against its neighbor Norway, and has since then enjoyed more than 200 years of peace. And so peace in combination with neutrality, so the self-identity of Swedes is that we are the peacemakers, we are the diplomats. We don't take sides, we don't engage in war. And I'm not allowed to be political, but it's a well-known fact that this is a highly political and polarizing issue, where usually those who are pro-NATO accession were to the right, and those against to the left. And so it was a huge moment when the time came to actually join NATO. And what tipped the scale? I mean, it's as the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama says with his usual irony, we have all of this thanks to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. He tipped the scale, and this decades-long debate finally came to a conclusion when especially Social Democrats, who again have this very long tradition of constructive criticism against NATO, finally said, okay, time of neutrality is over, it is time for us to pick sides. And how they managed to do this when it comes to strategic communication, it was basically brutal honesty. We have been living in this illusion as Swedes that we don't pick sides, but actually there was an implicit expectation that the US and NATO would come to our aid when we need to. And in all honesty, we have been cooperating with NATO for years even beforehand, so it was only a matter of making things official. So it was, the communication from the right was finally, let's do this. From the left, it was, we are doing this reluctantly, but we have to. And you can maybe criticize that approach because it's sort of half-hearted, but it's actually very powerful when somebody, a statesman, a politician who has been active for decades says, it hurts me to do this, but we have to.
So the fear was the mobilizing for broader society that after so many decades of neutrality, public opinion go a little bit in that side and...
Yes, so I mean, it's always, it's a cliche, but I mean, it's in a time of crisis when things happen. And it's a time of crisis when people look for leadership. And they turned to the political leadership and most of them, not all of them, said that NATO is our best option and we're in a hurry. But just to your point about how smooth it was, actually, and this is also my job, there was a lot of disinformation and turbulence in that process. If you remember, the plan was for Sweden and Finland to join NATO together for many various reasons, which we can go into. Swedish joined after Finland because it was delayed due to a lot of bilateral issues and disturbances.
I mentioned second part of my question is regarding the Balkans, but when you mentioned, never mind, when you mentioned actually smooth transition and your part or job that you were facing different kind of threats, can you compare maybe that with the situation in Montenegro when we were entering in NATO and we were facing those threats?
Absolutely. So entering NATO, there's more or less a template now. There will be heavy Russian interference, information manipulation, hybrid warfare. And they will not only attack Sweden or Montenegro directly, they will use every narrative, every wedge, every friction to its own advantage. So I don't know how much you follow the situation in Sweden, but we have this macabre tradition that has finally died down now of burning the Quran. Preferably in front of a Turkish or an Iranian embassy, because we have these chaos actors that want to raise chaos, riots, and the safest, easiest way to do it is to burn a Quran. And we have a pretty large Muslim population in Sweden. They get enraged, and there you go. So this coincided with the NATO application, actually. And so Russian threat actors and others used the opportunity to portray Sweden as the most Islamophobic country on the planet, which is ridiculous. But they did such a good job that actually Sweden, in parallel to joining NATO, had to worry about threat actors even from the Middle East, wreaking havoc, Swedish embassies being attacked, being burnt down in Iraq, for example. So that's why I tried to say it was a mess. It was very difficult, and Sweden was fighting on several fronts to finally make it happen.
But to the point of my last part of the first question, can you imagine something like that, a swift campaign to entering in NATO some of the Balkan countries that still are outside of the NATO?
Well, it's quite difficult to imagine, considering, I mean, the situation in Serbia and the attitudes towards NATO, the complete and utter division of Bosnia-Herzegovina. But it is my conviction that if the crisis is severe and immediate enough, any country can come together, no matter how polarized. I cannot tell you exactly what that big immediate threat would be, but if it comes, God forbid, I think it's possible.
Thank you. Milan, as someone whose field of work for years was discovering, following, debunking the malign influences and waging different kind of hybrid wars on Montenegro, but as well as on the region, same language space. We should mention that first working in the DFC, and now you are in the bank.org. I would like you to, you have now a much broader overview about everything. I would like you to ask you to assess a situation regarding the different kind of hybrid threats for the Montenegro, but for Western Balkan as well in this period of time and this new global shifting all around.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you for the question, but before I go to the answer, there's something I have to say. I would like to congratulate ACM for running this forum for 15 years now. It's a big jubilee, and running any kind of event for 15 years is no small task, yet alone the event of this scale and magnitude with this amount of guests, different people from different parts of the world, so congratulations. Now, going back to the question, since, I don't know, we don't have many time, or much time at all, but I will focus on Montenegro. We have heard several times throughout different panels, both yesterday and today, now directly from Ukraine, that one of the key components to being, let's say, more prepared or having better defense against this kind of modern 21st century threats is having the unity. But this is the main message, having unity on different fronts, in the institutions, in the country. And now, if you look at Montenegro, I don't think, we can get that. We cannot, agree upon many basic things, yet alone, foreign policies. When I say we, I mean both the citizens in Montenegro, but also the political elites who are now throughout, running the government. I will try to give a little bit of context. If we take hybrid threats as, let's say, set of malign activities run overtly or covertly by different set of state or non-state actors, then we have plenty to talk about in Montenegro, especially in the last few years, 5-6 years. And this started, let's say, on a bigger scale, coincided with Montenegrin membership to NATO, and now with the closer EU integration path, it's getting, again, more intensified. But it's really hard to imagine a unified position in a country or country with strong institutions where the most dominant political player is not coming from political sphere at all. So we have the most direct proxy of foreign interference of Russia and Serbia here in Montenegro, which comes from the religious sphere. It's Serbian Orthodox Church. And it's very dangerous because of the several factors. It's the most trusted institution in the country, not in 2025, but coming from the last, I don't know, as much as I followed 3-4 years, the most trusted institution. It acts as an umbrella organization for a set of different actors. And then you have their constant, let's say, political interference. Let's start with 2020 going forward, but even before that. And aside, that was, it's not just the religious sphere, you have the political scene, which is deeply polarized. And people now running the government were accused of running the coup in 2016. People from the government have close ties with Russia and Serbia, of authoritarian forces that would see Montenegro derail from its European path. And I don't expect, it to go smoothly. Even though we hear today in the forum, and even yesterday we hear these messages, 2028 is the time. But I don't think it will go smoothly, because there are forces in the region that will oppose that, but in the region, but in the country as well. Then you have the cultural field.
Which forces, I wanted to ask you?
In the government, for now, in this current government, you have people who are direct exponents of Serbia and Russia, and this will not, go smoothly for Montenegro.
But when you said that there are forces that they will oppose, that the process will not go smoothly, what do you mean by that? Do you mean that maybe even forcibly?
No,
by violence?
No, I don't think that's a viable option. There are like much more, more smart way to do so. Now in Podgorica, you have this issue with this system for sewage waters, which is a good example of how to stop the integrations, because many things depend on that. That is one just example, but I won't go into too many details due to the time restraints. I will also mention that aside from the religious sphere, political sphere, media sphere, we can debate about it in another panel, but you have this cultural organization with the same goal of not just maybe derailing Montenegro from EU path, but it's not about the EU at all. It's about the values, because we have strong forces in the country promoting anti-liberal and anti-democratic values, and everything starts for values. EU is based on values, so the values come first, and then we build based on that.
But one of those forces you mentioned, that not all of them are political. One of the strongest is the religious force. The religious force, Serbian Orthodox Church. It was very interesting before that presentation of Mr. Aleksandar Music that they are playing, actually everything is playing with our minds, with our emotions. How much is more difficult to fight that kind of institution and that kind of force, and what would be successful tactic against those kind of force and misinformation and disinformation and the values when they are spreading them?
I think that when I say we, I mean NGOs, media, institutions are very poor at sending good messages because we tend to be very boring. We focus on facts, on minds, we focus on jargons, on statistics. People, build trust with their emotions. And this is something that Aleksandar Music showcased today in his excellent presentation. And we fall behind in strategic communications because we speak in a language that is not very understandable to the common citizen. It's very complicated, it's very bureaucratic. it's boring.
But we have to speak with the facts.
Yeah, but we have to find different. If you look on the other side of the spectrum, why there is, at least this is my opinion, but we can debate, why there like the far right and let's say malign actors here and elsewhere around the world are more successful in spreading their story. Because they focus on simplicity over complexity. If you see a narrative, EU is divided, EU is weak, NATO is aggressive, Montenegro is Serbian land, Ukraine is a Nazi state. There is not much complexity to that, but it's a very simple message that gets carried over and over, and people start believing it. Then, because it's very emotional, it plays on the people's emotions, their fears, hopes, fears of what can be. So this builds this sense of belonging that we are under the same threat. And there doesn't need to be much depth to this story. As we can see, these narratives that we are discussing and were discussed in the forum today were very basic, simple, yet effective. Otherwise, we wouldn't discuss them. Yeah. So, and the third, they use this decentralized way of social media much better than we do. And much before we learned how to use social media, malign actors exploited social media for their gains. So I think that there is a combination of factors. I don't say it's a moral thing to do, but if you want to get the message right, we also have something to learn. We cannot stray away from the facts, but we can find a better, more normal way to discuss with regular citizens, like more interesting way to discuss and convey our messages. I think that here in the forum, I won't take much time, here in the forum, there were excellent messages. But we need to find a way to get them out of this hole, because many people inside already know them. But we need to think about the outside of this venue.
Yeah, there has to be a fine line.
Yeah.
And it's a good intro, this last part, for our next guest and our next panelist. Ms. Hafiz, as a chief communication officer in United Kingdom government, you were in charge particularly for two very interesting social but also security issue. It's a strategic communication during the COVID pandemic and strategic communication during the implementing the law that it's need to be adopted after the Brexit. Very, very delicate and difficult issues in both cases, but I would say that for Montenegro is specifically interesting the issue of the COVID pandemic because as everyone else, we had that problem, but also from that problem we had now even more problematic general immunization in country. I will give you just one concrete evidence of that. That would be that in 2024, only 22% of parents went with regular immunization and vaccination for their children. So in this this global shifting, global disease and pandemic of misinformation, disinformation, different kind of narrative and battle with the people's mind, how do you successfully succeed in that campaign?
Thank you for the question, Biljana, and thank you to the Atlantic Council of Montenegro for having me. I think my colleague Milan did an excellent job of laying out the challenge that government, institutions, and civil society are facing, especially when dealing with mis and disinformation from far-right sources especially. So I think government has an issue with credibility. Public trust is low in government in the UK and I think around the world. And the other issue is simplicity of messaging. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we were trying desperately to communicate with citizens about key public health messaging as well as business support because the COVID-19 pandemic had such a big economic impact on the UK as well. So some of my colleagues have talked more about FEMI and countering mis and disinformation. I'll focus on some of the principles of strategic communications, what I think we have to do really, really well in order to create messaging that will get out to our citizens, but also make sure that they can trust in the messengers and that it's something that they can believe. So the first principle of good strategic communications is being extremely clear on who our audience is and what we want them to do. What do we want? What is our objective? What do we want them to think, feel, and do if we're trying to create a behavior change campaign that makes sense? When we're thinking about our audience, we need to understand who they are in terms of demographics. You know, we've talked about the importance of religious institutions here in Montenegro. Who do they trust? Who do they believe? And where do they get their news? If we don't understand those things, we don't understand how to meet our audiences where they are, and we're shouting into the void if we don't understand our audiences on a really deep level. We also need to be clear about our objectives, you know, because there are so many aspects to public health. And is it that we want higher vaccination rates? Are there other factors at play that we need to address before we can go straight to motivating people to increase public vaccination? The second thing we need to do once we fully understand our audiences and we're clear on our objectives is to understand the barriers to action that people are facing. In the UK, we use a model called the COM-B behavioral framework, and that's an acronym that stands for barriers of capability, opportunity, and motivation. It's really useful to outline these barriers because while strategic communications is incredibly important, sometimes there are barriers that can only be changed on a policy level, and that's why communications needs to work hand in hand with policy to make behavior change. Barriers of capability, those describe a person's ability to take up the action themselves. So that means if I'm living in a small town in the UK or Montenegro, do I have access to a hospital or a pharmacy or a clinic where I can actually take my child and get them vaccinated? Barriers of opportunity are more about the systematic opportunity to do that. So that means, are there enough healthcare professionals that have the training to give the vaccines? Are there enough vaccines available in my country? Those two types of barrier relate more to policies themselves, whereas the final category of barrier, which is about motivation, that's something where communications can be really effective. So that's about, do people understand why vaccination is important? Do they understand the risks if children aren't vaccinated? And that's where we can use communications on all kinds of channels through a variety of messengers to make the case for why this behavior is important.
If I understood you correctly, there were one message. There were different messages on different levels.
Yes, absolutely. So in the UK,
who were the messengers?
That's a great question. That's the third step, which is about we need to communicate simply through trusted messengers. So in the UK, while government officials are not always, politicians are not so trusted, we know that pharmacists are actually a group that has really high degrees of trust, along with community leaders, religious figures. So one of the things we did, we had a clear and simple message at the beginning of the communications campaign, which did shift, and we faced many challenges as the pandemic went on for so much longer than anyone expected. But the first key message was stay home, protect the NHS, and save lives. That's a message that people can remember, and the motivation is baked in. Why should I stay home? Because I want to save lives, because it will protect the NHS, which I do trust and I do believe in, to help me and my family. So if Montenegro wants to look to what the UK did during our pandemic response, I think that those are the three things to focus on. Be clear on who your audience is, what your objectives are, diagnose the barriers to action, and communicate simply through trusted messengers.
Thank you. Having in mind that we have only 6 minutes, 6 and 30 seconds, I will give opportunity to our audience to ask questions if someone wants to. And I think that I see few hands. The gentleman in the 4th row, I think that he was the first one.
Hi, everybody. Miroslav from the Hybrid COE. Very, very good debate. Interestingly, we could have opened up a little bit more when the politician actually went out of the room. And because it was so optimistic to listen to them how Montenegro is actually already in the EU. And interestingly to see that not everybody here in the region and in the global hybrid competitive environment are very happy with that outcome. You have the ambassador here of Russia who is openly suggested that that kind of action now is threatening Russia security interests, and that's jeopardizing their security. And he's still ambassador. That's one thing. And we know that hybrid activities in this region are not a new thing, that have the priming position of the hybrid actors here is quite, how to say, firm. And I know that you are all following this, particularly Musaefendić and Jovanović. And do you find that in the forthcoming period, which is the next 2-3 years, do you predict maybe like an inflow of hybrid activities, or you think that that has been left aside as a done deal and as it was mentioned in these panels before? Thank you.
Thank you. To take another question, I think the lady behind you is the one also.
Thank you, Mareike Ulberg, German Marshall Fund. I want to address what I think is a bit the elephant in the room, and that is the question, are we ready for the wave of cognitive battles that's going to hit us from our west of us, from our friends across the Atlantic? We're talking about vaccines. I mean, I'm thinking of RFK Jr. and what he's been promoting. Yesterday, I had several points where some of the Russian narratives were laid out, some of the Serbian-Russian narratives, which have a lot of overlap with Christian nationalism in the United States. In Germany, we have dealt with almost attempts at regime change with the German elections. So we've already been dealing with Russia. Are we here in Europe ready with the link up between East and West, basically pinching us on the information space? And what can we do to deal with that? Because I really fear there's a huge wave that's going to hit us that's going to make everything more difficult. Thank you.
Thank you. And the gentleman over there. Okay. Gentleman and then lady here, yes.
I'll try to be short. My name is Radoš Mušović. I work from NATO headquarters in Brussels. First of all, let me just thank you for having Ukrainian voices today, because this is very important, especially in this region and in Montenegro. So thank you for traveling that far. You gave me so much brain food and very interesting discussions. I would just say that recently I had a meeting with prisoners of war, Ukrainian prisoners of war that escaped Russian prisons. And I think if there is a Stratcom story and there's an emotional story and battle of mind story, is what these people lived through. And unfortunately, I heard it only in my meeting room, and I don't hear it in Europe. So, but what I would ask from the panel, if from my own position working as someone at NATO, if you were in a room with NATO leaders and you were given a couple of minutes to give them 3 main points where they have to invest political capital and resources in this sphere, what would those 3 main points be? Thank you.
Lady here, yeah.
Thanks a lot. Was it for me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have the mic now. Thank you so much. Minna Olander, I'm Associate Fellow at Chatham House. I have a very brief question to those of you who are in government positions. How do you deal with the fact that especially a lot of young people get most of their information through social media like TikTok or something? And I mean, everybody knows how difficult it is with TikTok, like you can't have it on your government device and so on. So how do you bridge that gap between like what kind of media, especially young people, consume? Thank you.
Hello, Marko from ICDS think tank from Estonia. So I think debunking is so yesterday, and I'm still surprised that we are discussing debunking strategies as an option. So my question is very short. What is stopping us to be very active on the pre-bunking tactics. Thanks.
So we are basically exceed our time. Only less than a minute is us, but could you please then, as soon as possible, start answering on the questions?
So I will try to be brief. The first question was about whether we expect hybrid activities to be increased or decreased in the future. I think that they try when there is divisions in the society, and the more divisions, the more divided region and Montenegro is, and we can see that this is not going to change soon. I think we can expect, having in mind that also there could possibly be enlargement of the EU in the next couple of years, Montenegro the current forerunner. So I think that around that geopolitical event and political event specifically, we can expect more of these multi-vectoral activities to occur.
I will just pick up on that first question, which was partly addressed to me. I definitely expect the hybrid activity to intensify because, as was said, I mean, Montenegro is on a good path, but it is a very divided country. And one aspect to keep in mind is that, as you said, Moldova has done great. Yes. We're very happy for that, but that could also mean that Russia will be seeking other hosts for their chaos-spreading activities, which might mean that they will invest even more in Serbia and Montenegro. And we have already seen some signs of that in Serbia.
And Mr. Musaefendić, questions regarding where do NATO need to invest in 3 points?
I will try to give not 3, but only 1.
Yeah, okay.
I think that it would send a really strong message to install and organize a COE in the Balkans. I think it would be a very good move, and yeah, that's the only one thing.
I think that you specifically, Yasmine, would maybe wanted to address the question.
I can speak to Marika's and Minna's points.
Yes.
So, in terms of U.S. mis and disinformation, and also how do we have an influencer strategy, or how do we use new media points? I think on the first point, we have to defend a free and fair and open media with everything that we have, including academic institutions, which when they're threatened. And we also need to reach people in new media formats. The UK government has just started something called the New Media Unit, which is specifically looking at that. And we actively are working with influencers in a way that we haven't before in terms of giving them access and working through other trusted voices to put out our messaging. So that's definitely something that we're looking to do.
I want to answer a question about TikTok and messengers. Yes. As you see, I'm young, and all my team also young people. Average age in the Center for Countering Disinformation is approximately 30 years old. So every one of us is familiar with social media, TikTok, etc., etc. And what I want to say, in Ukraine, we have the same situation. The most popular source of news for all ages, it's Telegram. It's a messenger. TikTok is also in top 3. And what we do with it, we create our channels on all the platforms. For example, Center have 2 channels on YouTube. We have Telegram, we have Viber, we have WhatsApp, we have TikTok, etc., etc. So, in my opinion, right now, government must be multi-channel. It must talk with all audiences, and it must create content that give you emotions, how my colleagues already said today. So, yes, we see this tendency, and we are trying to deal with it. We are trying to be everywhere, let's say like this, and we are trying to reach everyone. So, thank you so much.
So, we are more than exceeded our time, and we need to finish. Thank you, all of you, for participating in this panel, for actively participating by the audience, and this is the issue that issues that we will discuss more and more in the times to come. Thank you very much.